I'd like to thank everybody for coming. My name is Joel Yoker. I'm a solution architect with Microsoft Services. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about data center services. So this is a solution that comes from Microsoft Services. It's based on a lot of the experiences we've had. So with the release of System Center 2012, we're on our third release of this product, or excuse me, of this solution. And we're basically trying to provide a lot of the data center services that you would typically do in an infrastructure as a service deployment. So first, to talk a little bit about Microsoft Services. Microsoft Services is our consulting arm and our premier support arm of Microsoft. So we provide a breadth of services for customers who have purchased our products. So as we start with enterprise strategy, we can finish with support of solutions and products that we deploy within our customer base. We deploy with and through our partners. So we have a broad spectrum of partners that provide services today for a lot of our customers, and we work with them to help deploy these solution offerings and also deploy our products. And what we're really bringing to bear is a lot of our experience, both in Microsoft's products, but also in the ecosystems we see within our customer base. So we have a lot of verticals we work in, such as different industries with customers, and we try to bring that customer experience along with it. So when we look at data center services presents a whole series of problems to most businesses. So trying to develop and deploy a suite of solutions to our customers, we typically see when they try to deploy services, the first thing we have is an ingest process. So this is a lot of the spectrum of problems that customers have. This ingest process comes in from a lot of different mechanisms. This could be paper process. This could be something where they use some level of automated system to be able, like a ticketing system, to be able to consume a request from a customer so that they can consume services against an infrastructure. Once that service request comes in, then there's the IT group has to do something with that. So sometimes that's automated, and sometimes we see that there's some type of review that has to happen. So there's a lot of people process in between that first initial request and the services that they receive. Then at one point we have to go ahead and take that information and then provision services. This is where a lot of organizations have spent a lot of time automating different parts of their process. Now, it could be portions of their process, or it could be end-to-end. But what we see, this provisioning process is a lot of about taking that request, all the parameters that comes in, and implementing that service. What this kind of results in is a little bit of a problem for a lot of our customers. We've seen these silos emerge. So either customers are afraid of the SLAs that these various services require, so they develop little enclaves to be able to support them, either by service line or by technology area, or they begin to go ahead and combine these in a way that they really weren't meant to be together. They don't understand what those resources are required, so they lump them all together and allow them to commingle without allowing or taking advantage of different services and the requirements that they may have. Once we go ahead and bring those services in, customers then have to go ahead and deploy all of these management tools. So if you think about a common data center, there's a series of applications and services that they need to deploy on that. This may be the management tools that they need. There's some type of monitoring capability they have, antivirus, patch management. Think of all the different agents that you may have within your organization to go ahead and provide a data center managed solution. And all of those tend to happen after the provisioning of the systems or the services themselves. Once this happens, we have a broad spectrum of different tool sets that we need to pull into. So customers are reaching out and they're grabbing into different consoles and different tools, different processes to go ahead and provide that ongoing lifecycle maintenance. This tends to result in what we see as a little bit of over-provisioning because this flood of requests are coming in. Organization is responding to them as fast as they can because they want to be as agile as possible. So we begin to over-provision, begin to be able to stick things into the system and oversubscribe it in a way that it was never really designed for. So we've implemented a series of infrastructure based on a virtualization platform, based on our hardware platform, but it's not really a measured service, and it doesn't contain all of the attributes of cloud, even though we're trying to do that in a lot of different ways, but we do that mostly manually. And so what this really results in is not only the capital expenditure that the customers have made to go ahead and get this deployed, but we're seeing these costs come up from an operational expenditure perspective. And you could probably look at one of these different areas and see which one has the biggest pain point for your organization or for the customer that you're serving. So the way we see enterprise services, a data center services model, is we see that as being a measured service. So we have this idea of self-service, so customers can go out and provide, request against a quota that they would have against the entire system. That provisioning process would be automated end to end. And we would take our resources and we pool them, and we might pool them by different characteristics. So we may say that a VDI workload is a lot different than our SQL workloads. So we want to take those resources and pool them and identify specific characteristics that are characteristic to the load we're trying to put on them. And then we want to go ahead and manage them, but in an automated way. We want to make sure that all of the different agents and all of the different services that we need to deploy are there from day one, from minute one when we deploy those services. So as we begin to consume them, which is the expectation of the consumer is immediate access to those services, we do it in a way that doesn't mitigate any of the management capabilities that we've put out there. So in terms of maintenance, we want to be able to patch management, and from other perspectives, we want that to be automated. So we want that to be out of the gate, fully configured, and ready to go. And then I talked a little bit about quota-based allocation. We do this self-service in a way that is good for basically for the provider. We want to ensure that we identify a certain set of quotas so that people can consume against that quota, not against just the needs that they have within the organization, so that we don't oversubscribe the system. And the way that should work is at the end of the day, we expect that to be an optimized resource. So those services that we're doing, we're able to look at the capacity and look at it in a predictable way as a provider. So a consumer has this concept of unlimited capacity. And that's great for a consumer, but when we look at it from a provider's perspective, that's a bit of a nightmare. So we have to really provide predictable capacity so that we can predict the consumption and go out and buy other resource pools as required. So from a business's perspective, there's a lot of pressure, right? These different applications and services that are out there, they have to innovate. They have to be able to respond to their customers' demands. Customers are hitting their application and are requiring more from them. So they look at the data center from a couple of different lenses. First off, they may look at the data center as being a traditional data center. They're somewhat held hostage, right, by the IT organization. The IT organization only gives them what they believe that they need, but the application comes to them with a series of requirements that may meet or exceed that. The next side that they see is this concept of a cloud, where they're able to go out and consume services based on their needs and based on their quota and budget. So it becomes very flexible for them to be able to pull those services, and they're able to go ahead and consume those services as quickly as possible versus a traditional data center model that takes a little bit of time, has some manual process, and maybe some pain and friction. So again, you might look at this and you may find that there's a lot of different pieces in between. There's a lot of shades of gray in between these two sides, but we largely see that customers fall into one or two areas. Now, from the provider perspective, again, they have the responsibility of providing this across their organization, and they have to do it in a predictable manner. That concept, or that concept of unlimited capacity, is something that is great for the consumer, but again, for the provider, becomes a bit of a challenge. They need predictable capacity. They need to know when storage needs to be purchased. They need to know when they need more compute or when their network's being oversubscribed, so that they can provide the same quality of service to all of the different business consumers or the applications and services that reside on their cloud. Again, they may fall into two different areas. From a traditional data center, they may have a whole series of manual processes, or they may have some automation sprinkled in, but they have sprinkled in some manual processes that slow down or drive costs way up inside the organization. And then the other side is this idea of a private cloud. So being able to provide an elastic service that is available to their customers that they don't have to spend a lot of manual time or operational expenditure against managing. So data center services is a bit of a spectrum for us. First off, it is a series of packaged services. So we've taken a lot of the expertise that we've had through deployment with various organizations, and we've gone ahead and taken that, all that content, and provided that in the form of guidance. So we've taken that guidance and we've moved into a reference architecture and a reference implementation so that we can deliver this in a very automated, turnkey fashion. So we go through and we take all of our best practices guidance for all the products, because there's a lot of guidance that's out there on how to deploy these products for certain scale, and a lot of capabilities that customers want to receive out of these products as we release them. So for this, we've taken all of those different pieces and we've automated a lot of the setup and made a lot of the decisions on behalf of the customers to be able to assist them with deploying a private cloud solution on top of System Center. Once we move forward, we look to take those and make them extensible in the sense that we have a lot of different mechanisms to deploy all of these different pieces. And I'll talk about workflows and the CMDB and so on that we've included inside this. But it's very extensible in the sense that we've allowed customers to get the rich capabilities that are in the product by providing them a bit of starter dough. So we've essentially illustrated the art of the possible through this reference implementation. So data center services has a series of flavors to it. And we start with foundation. So when we look at private cloud foundation, what foundation provides is some of the base capabilities of the products. And we look primarily for customers that are shooting for that low end, maybe kind of medium business automation of provisioning workloads into a virtualized infrastructure. And we're bringing App Controller as our front end portal, Operations Manager and VMM to provide the management, and we're providing full integration. So these are automated deployments of these based on the best practices that you'll read about as you see on TechNet. As we move up the stack, we provide an additional layer of automation through hydration, and we bring the full suite of System Center products to bear. So all of the different capabilities that you would see within these products and bringing all of the integration points together, deploying them in an automated fashion against the best practices that have been vetted by both services and the product groups, we've gone ahead and delivered that through Advanced. And then where we look at kind of customers that are looking for those larger scale deployments, we move into basically our Enterprise release. Enterprise has a series of things. Not only do we bring the entire canvas of those System Center products together, we also write against that canvas by providing a built-in CMDB. So starter dough from that perspective. We also bring in a series of workloads or workflows for infrastructure as a service common activities that you would do. And we front end all of that with a portal that I'm going to go through here in a bit. So we look at the capabilities in System Center 2012. A lot of people have heard about the service templates. So this is the idea of being able to take a series of systems or a series of virtual machines and deploying them in a way that they provide a consolidated service or an application. You may deploy those in concert so that they can provide a single service to your organization. And they have a lot of capabilities, rich capabilities within that. But what we find with a lot of infrastructure as a deployment or infrastructure as a service deployments is some of these applications and services require a level of customization. They may need SharePoint, and they may need it in a standardized way across the organization, but they may need to pick certain attributes or certain capabilities within the SharePoint platform. So we have to make some deployment time decisions. Maybe it's the naming that's required. Maybe it's certain capabilities that we want to automate. Maybe it's a certain layer of individual IP that we have as an organization that we need to stick on to every deployment of SQL or SharePoint or every web server that we put out there. So to be able to do that, we have this concept of advanced or enhanced service templates. So enhanced service templates leverages the power of hydration, which if you were in a session before, you learned a little bit about MDT. Hydration is built on the task sequencing engine from MDT. And what we do is we provide a level of choice while obscuring a lot of the complexity of the deployments of the workloads within them. So this is just an enhancement on top of the service template capabilities that are provided natively within System Center 2012. So when we look at this, we try to provide a cloud management solution from two perspectives. There's a concept of what we call the tenant, right? And the tenant is someone that is a program level or a business level that manages a suite of applications. And those applications are what we call user roles, or we previously called services. And these application owners or these user role groups may have a team of developers or managers who manage a particular set of systems. So they're consuming resources against the fabric, and then the tenants are then carving up a piece of that fabric to give out to their services. Now, there's one area that's not illustrated here, and that's the fabric administrator. And what we do through our delivery and we do our deployments of data center services is we work with the organization to define the compute and the storage and the network and all of those different capacity levels to assign a quota to a given fabric. So what can a fabric deliver to the organization in terms of those attributes? And then we carve those out by tenant, and that's that cloud management. And that tenant then has a chunk of that fabric that they're able to allocate to their services or their user roles that are out there. And that's where the infrastructure actually gets consumed. So what we've seen over the years is we've seen a lot of customers have focused primarily on this, standardizing this lower level. So storage, network, compute, facility, all the types of physical aspects. For the last decade, those have been highly standardized in a lot of our enterprise customers. So for that hardware layer, we've really taken care of as we look up the stack. A lot of organizations have also standardized on virtualization layers. They've made some choices in different places, but they're standardizing as we go up the stack. And then what we're seeing a large push for now, and what System Center really brings to bear, is this concept of management to be able to provide a consolidated service. So we've seen a ton of focus in that front layer, being able to provide a skin, if you will, or an entry point to be able to consume services of virtualization and hardware, to be able to deploy virtual machines to those systems or deploy services and applications. But what we find is that without having a management layer and a way to orchestrate them, that we're missing a lot of the picture. We need to be able to capture all of that into a change control database. We need to be able to understand the different relationships between those applications to be able to provide a true private cloud infrastructure. So if we kind of look under the hood at some of the components, and this is more of a reference than anything, I guess the biggest piece that I'd like to explain is the fact that we retain everything into basically a common CMDB. So we use Service Manager to contain all of the different configuration items that we would have around our private cloud, around the different services, applications, and virtual machines that we would deploy into the infrastructure. And we use a service request mechanism to be able to do this, and all the different System Center components consume from that. So we have an orchestrated workflow that captures information from our CMDB and then orchestrates various actions across the different System Center products. And what that allows us to do is to provision systems in a fully managed way across these different systems without having to interject a human process or something that could be possibly error-prone. We look at our topology. We deploy a best practices model of all of our different System Center products. So based on the model that you do, Foundation, Enterprise, or Advanced, we have a standard template that we do to provide a given level of service. So we know what a highly available virtual machine manager infrastructure needs to look like. We know all of the different gotchas when it comes to perform the install, all of the different decision points, and we bundle that into a hydration model that allows us to quickly deploy that in a very consistent way as we go out. And we deploy both the System Center products and we also deploy the resource pools associated with it so that when it comes time to go ahead and provision additional capacity against our fabric, we can do that also in a very standardized way, in a very rapid way, as fast as we can deploy hardware, along with our additional automation that we've placed in the System Center products. So a lot of this is surfaced through this self-service portal that we provide. So our cloud management portal has another number of different attributes. So when we look at cloud management and we hit the new cloud management tab, has anybody seen the previous editions of DCS? There's a whole lot of stuff with hands in the air. That's good. So this is the new one that's coming out for DCS 2.0. And what this gives you is a little bit of a thumbprint. So what we were able to do from a 30,000-foot view before was we were able to show you resource consumption basically at the tenant and service level. So we could look at how quota was being consumed against what was available. We provided a much more granular view because we have different pivot points now that we're able to kind of assign quota against versus a blank quota that we were able to do. So that granular introspection that we get with System Center 2012, we're exposing that through this. So you can look at your systems, for example, you can look at foobar here, and the foobar service of that application is consuming a series of CPU, and we can see that it's a high consumer of memory, but what we also see is that it's not really consuming much storage. So we're able to see as a tenant where we're able to assign quota and what types of services my different applications are using within my business units. And then I'm also able to go ahead and look at that as a provider and get an idea of where my consumption really falls and how I need to be able to plan for the future. So when we dive into tenant management, we're able to go ahead and assign various tenant administrators. So this is a business process, and that's really what this is about, is being able to expose a lot of business rules through the cloud services into the back end of System Center. So we're able to assign a series of administrators who have the ability to dice up quota and create new services or user roles. These are these applications that are consuming infrastructure from our fabric. And we're able to go ahead and dice up the different quotas. So we talked a little bit about drilling down into this and being able to, as we look at each service, that one service that's not really using as much storage, we're able to assign quota in a very granular manner to those services. So we may need to give them a little bit more CPU quota. We may need to be able to give them a little bit more memory, but we can shrink down on that storage and maybe allocate it to one of our other applications that needs it more. Because I've been given by the Fabric administrator, by my organization, a chunk of that fabric, and I need to use that across all those different applications pretty wisely. If I take another drill down, I'm able to go ahead and look even further and go ahead and assign things. We have the concept of being able to do clouds now within VMM. So we're able to go ahead and assign various clouds and various levels of service within that infrastructure. And I can also go in and I can assign various user roles. So this is a given service. I can drill down into that service and assign an administrator or a suite of administrators, which is typically what we see with applications, access to this particular service so that they can go out and provision against their quota. Now, if you're familiar with the previous iteration of DCS, and that's Data Center Services, what we were able to do is we had a lot of this information is stored within relationships that we defined within the CMDB. So these are configuration items that we would expose various pieces. Kind of the benefit to this is we were able to then, when we define relationships between user roles and tenants and various elements within the fabric, we can kind of carve that out so they can only see what is important to them or what they're able to consume. I do a lot of data center engagements where I'm working with customers who have existing ingest processes, and they may have things like they will assign you a VLAN, and you may have VLAN 67, 101, and 200. And those VLANs are 200 is management, and then 67 is your public interface, and then maybe you're doing iSCSI or cluster traffic on the other. And of course, you're quickly scribbling all of these things down so you can take notes. Maybe you get an email and you're able to have this. But there's got to be a better way to be able to provide that, one, in a way that consumers can understand. What are the management interfaces? What are cluster traffic, iSCSI traffic, any kind of dedicated network? And then what are the publicly accessible interfaces that they have? And then also not allow them to understand what the rest of the world is, because give them what's important to them. So being able to assign specific storage elements that may be accessible to them, or being able to assign different parts of the fabric that are only relevant to that particular, or permitted to that particular tenant or service. So we used to expose that, and we still do, through our service management CMDB. And what we've done now is we've front-ended all of this with a common UI, so we can stay within the portal and be able to provide those infrastructure relationships for all of the different aspects of the fabric. And then, of course, exposing only things that are relevant to that particular tenant and service. And that's how we achieve a lot of the multi-tenancy that we're able to do within the Data Center Services solution. We're also able to go ahead and surface various requests, so we know that there are change requests that are happening, and everything that gets changed inside the portal and anything that we need to be able to do to make modifications to this will always be surfaced in the form of a change request. So we are always surfacing this through change control, and all approvals are automated after action through that change request process. So we look at how the consumers, right, those user roles, are consuming those services. They have a different view of the world. So based on how many user roles they've been assigned, we may have an administrator that has multiple applications and multiple suites of services that they're pulling, or systems that they're pulling from the infrastructure. We're able to go ahead and look at those by each user role. So these are each discrete set of applications or services that they're pulling from the infrastructure. This may be a suite of virtual machines for each one of these user roles that provide a discrete level of service to the organization. And kind of at a bird's eye view, I'm able to see how many VMs are associated with each one of those, what the alerts that are coming from Operations Manager, what my quota is based on all of these different attributes, and then how much I've consumed for those services that I'm responsible for. And one of the things I'll point out is this idea, this concept of unlimited. We have some applications that may have business rules that require them to consume more. We don't have to put them in a quota system. So that's new to DCS 2.0, is the ability to kind of provide that unlimited quota to different services that require it within the organization. Once I drill down a little bit farther, I can go in. I'm going into a particular service. I can then dive into my user role and look at the different virtual machines and what they have in terms of the services that they're providing. So I can see what their consumption rate is against my quota. I can also see the consumption rate against the fabric. And as you see here, there's a few of these bubbles that are lit up. So this is information that's in aggregate that's coming back from the various System Center products. So this is really kind of, again, the art of the possible, where we're pulling information from System Center and aggregating it here in a single UI. And we provide that thumbnail view of each virtual machine where we can look at the various alerts for that particular system, and then obviously what the various health states are, and in a very simple red, green, and yellow type format. One of the things you will notice is with some of the different services that are here, like this one, I don't have backup enabled, and that's because we're not enabling DPM in this particular solution. I have a third-party backup tool that may be going ahead and backing this up. So we're not exposing that through the UI by default. If I want to drill down further, I can go ahead and double-click on one of these systems, and then I'm exposed to kind of what I call my virtual rack, right? This is basically the dashboard that gives me some of the common things that I would want to be able to do to manage this system. I get, again, a little bit more of a drill down into the specifications of the virtual machine. I'm able to see some of the consumption from the services at a high level, and I'm able to perform various actions, such as connecting to those systems remotely or being able to perform different discrete actions. As we go across the various tabs, I could go into performance monitoring, and I can pull in any of the different performance counters that System Center has been asked to sample and pull in. So if I go out to Operations Manager, I can configure through the management packs or through custom configuration to pull any performance counter that we want and sample that at a rate, and I can expose that then to my consumer without having to give them all of the access to these consoles. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces that I think of when I look at DCS and this solution offering is a lot of organizations, you can do all this with the products. The products fully give you the capability to delegate a lot of rich rights to the information that they're exposing. But we can do that in a very common way and through a single UI through here. So we're simply subscribing to a lot of the capabilities that we provide out of the box with System Center and exposing it through this UI. So when it comes to provisioning, in provisioning, as I talked about building those different relationships, this is where they really come together. So as I go out and I'm looking to go ahead and consume services, I can create the concept of a domain. Now, one thing we think about when we think of domains is we think of domains and work groups and what the name of the various domains are. But we may have a different management profile associated with that. So this configuration item in the CMDB has a lot of information behind it. It may be that this is, right here we use the DCS domain. This could be DCS managed. This could be DCS operationally managed. This could be DCS with antivirus. These are the various elements that we have here, all of the different management capabilities. We surface that in the CI. And what that gives us the ability to do is to create a service that may cost differently to the organization, because each one of those agents carries a licensing cost, and I need to make sure that I manage that. When I look at the locations, I'm able to go ahead and pick different locations that I want to provision to. So one of the examples, we get a lot of requests for customers saying, well, I've got people that need to be able to deploy systems to one particular cloud, but I don't want them to be able to provision to another set of resource pools or another location. I need to prevent that in some way. So we have the ability to pick locations and identify exactly where we want to provision systems to in our cloud. We can then pick the various clouds. That's, again, that level of service that we define within VMM. We're exposing that in one location. We can identify the virtual machines that we want to publish, and we can provision as many as we're able to go ahead and identify, and we can do that in an incremented way so we don't have to provide unique naming across them. We can then go ahead and pick some of these other aspects as we look at the hardware profile and the OS profile. These may have different capabilities that we've included in them. Again, taking a lot of the information that we expose through VMM, things that we can automate already, and then exposing it in a very common way or a human-readable way. Once we do that, I talked a little bit about that VLAN. We can present that information in a much cleaner fashion than just giving VLAN IDs to someone. We can make it something that people can actually understand, and we're able to change that through those UI elements so that it's very simple to understand. And then for each one of these choices, which doesn't quite expose, we go ahead and we talk about, or we expose what the different quota consumption is. So as you make different choices in this UI, we dynamically change the quota consumption, and we're able to show a level of chargeback in the system, so we can, or showback, to be able to show how much that's costing us from an organization perspective. What is the cost against the fabric? And we can either use that to charge back to the different user role that's consuming services, or at least show them what they're using in form of their budget. Now, if you exceed your quota, I always use the example of if I send my son to the store for milk, right? And he goes and he checks out, grabs, I send him with $5, he picks up a gallon of milk, and he grabs a candy bar, and he goes to the checkout counter, and it's $5.50. Well, he can't check out. He's got to make a resource decision. He's got to decide, am I going to come home with milk, or am I going to come home with a candy bar? I hope he comes home with milk. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to provide that kind of enforcement for checkout so that they can make a resource decision. So again, if someone goes and they choose something, they choose a series of options that exceeds the quota that they have, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do two things. We're going to light up the UI in red to show them that they've exceeded their quota, and then we're going to gray out the ability for them to submit the provisioning request. So this change request will never go through because they haven't made a proper resource decisions. So they need to do one of two things. They need to rethink the virtual machines that they're provisioning, the number of virtual machines or different attributes of those virtual machines, or they need to go back and ask for more quota. And depending on the organization, they may need to do one or the other, and we want to surface that again through a single UI and through this portal. And then once they go ahead and they back those things off, they get within their quota model, they can submit the provisioning request, which doesn't really tell any of these different System Center components to do something in particular. What it does is it submits it in the form of a change request. It takes all of their options, submits that change request to the CMDB, and then it's then surfaced and picked up through Orchestrator to go ahead and begin touching all the different System Center products to complete provisioning. So if we drill down a little bit further, we're able to go ahead and see if we need to make that request. If I oversubscribed and I picked more and I said, you know what, I really need what I need to make my applications hum within my user role. So these series of systems need to have I need 3 of them and they need to have a certain set of characteristics. Well, I can go back and I can ask my tenant administrator to up my quota. Again, the tenant administrator can look out and say, yep, I understand you need these quad-core systems available to you on our infrastructure and your quota doesn't allow it, but I see that you're not really using as much storage, and I also see that some of our other user roles, some of these other applications that are out there aren't using as much as well, so I'm going to reallocate some quota over to your service, and they're able to go ahead and make those modifications from that single UI. And then within that, I can also go ahead and create new user roles. So if I dive down and I say, well, we need to create another class of service, or we need to be able to provide different services or more discrete levels of services for those applications, I can create new user roles, and I can assign the quota that I've been assigned by the Fabric administrator out to those systems. Again, everything that we do from a tenant or from a service perspective always will go through the UI. And we can submit those. Again, we used to be able to do this through a generic change request, and now we're able to go ahead and make those change requests directly through this, and they can be in a rich manner. So again, if I need to be able to say that along with this System Center 2000 or this Windows 2008 R2 SP1 Enterprise Small template, there's some additional templates that are available that have been made available by the Fabric administrator based on my needs. Now we do have that quad-core infrastructure that's been out there. They've kind of looked at the Fabric and said this is what we're able to provide. Again, from that predictable capacity perspective, they can select those templates, go ahead and request that, and then that request can be approved on the back end by the Fabric administrator. All of this contained within that CMDB, so we're not circumventing any of our change control processes within the organization. So when we look at it, at the infrastructure, and we want to go ahead and deploy this, all of our workflows that we do, all the different actions that we do within this are orchestrator workflows. So we're providing a series of infrastructure as a service workflows that are very traditional to those types of operations. And this is the way we look at orchestration and automation across this. So this is one of our mock-ups for host patching. And as we look at the different areas that have to be accessed in all the different systems, for host patching, we have to do a number of things. We have to squelch we have to squelch all of our operational alerts that come in. We need to go ahead and take those services offline. There's a whole series of System Center products that we need to touch, and there's a lot of manual request processes that we need to do. So as we look at each one of our workflows, this is how we mock them up internally. And this is what we've implemented. We implement this with full error control, and we also pull all of this stuff into our CMDB. So as each action occurs, we can go ahead and write a status back to the CMDB as to where this happens. Now, when we look at that, we can also take various points in this and we can interject some type of approval process. So some of these may be automated end-to-end because we want to provide that service, such as provisioning a virtual machine. But for others, we may want to go ahead and actually intervene and have some type of approval process so someone can look at that service request and say, yes, we're going to allow that to move forward, or maybe we send an email so we can archive so we know what's happening within the system. So part of the benefits, I think, when we look at Microsoft services, there's about 40 of us that are running around in black shirts today and throughout MMS. So if you have questions about this particular solution offering, we can talk about it. We'll be in the expo hall. But of the 40 of us that are out here, we've all kind of been involved in either development or deployment of these solutions. So please come up and ask us about this. And what we're really doing is we're bringing a lot of our best practices from our customer base, and we're also bringing the best practices from GFS, and we're helping partners and customers get our System Center products both deployed and also providing a little bit of the art of the possible through this solution itself. So if you're familiar with Royal Mail is the postal service for the UK. So they did a large-scale deployment. Part of the point that they wanted to be able to do is provide kind of a turnkey solution of the System Center stack and all of the capabilities that we described today. And obviously, as you can see, they wanted to be able to reduce costs. They wanted to manage change. That's probably the biggest request that we receive is not only can we automate all of these different pieces through the rich automation that we get through System Center, but the ability to manage that in a change control environment, right? A lot of organizations have adopted change control in a very stringent way, and we want to be able to provide that. So Royal Mail went ahead and did one of our deployments, and they saw an incredible payback on what they're able to do from being able to recoup costs that they were spending today in their infrastructure. So I'll go ahead and open it up to questions if you have any about the solution. Yep, please come to the mic if you have any questions.
Yeah, throughout the discussion, you talked about a couple things leading to efficient resource utilization by empowering the customers, either chargeback or showback. How's that experience going with your customers? Because, I mean, I think that's kind of the secret sauce that everybody's looking for. And, you know, where in the organization is that being implemented, and what's the feedback?
So we see, that's a good question. So the question is, where are we seeing that kind of the holy grail is a little bit of this chargeback and showback model, and how are customers doing this today? We're seeing a lot of organizations move into this cloud space as they move into private cloud. They're moving very cautiously. So what we're seeing is a lot of showback models that are coming forward. So a lot of customers really want to expose what their expenditure is back from an IT perspective back to those service consumers, right? So these user roles or these services that are out there, a lot of it is providing showback. So in terms of how it's working out, it's kind of the first time. It's a little bit like kicking over a rock, right? Bugs crawl out everywhere as soon as you do it. So in terms of being able to provide that as something that a lot of IT has not been able to do to date across the board. So being able to pool all those resources together and being able to show them what the cost back to the organization is pretty powerful. But in terms of how well it's going, it is a big change for a lot of organizations. So we're seeing them kind of move slowly, again, focusing more on that showback and then possibly moving into chargeback in the future.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Hello. At the beginning of the deck, you had a slide, all right? There was I believe, standard, advanced, and enterprise solution, right? What is the biggest difference between the advanced and the enterprise solution? I believe the enterprise is the ECS, beside the portal versus the app controller.
So let me move back.
Right at the beginning, I believe it was the 4th or the 5th slide.
Yep. Let me bring that back up so we can talk about that. So I might have moved through that really quickly.
There we go.
So the biggest difference between advanced and enterprise is advanced is real, and the question you're asking is on the slide, what is the differences between the two?
I only see the app control on the advanced, and the portal, I believe, it's in the enterprise beside the having app controller, correct?
Yeah.
Because
so,
go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So beyond the portal, so the portal is one of the aspects. So the portal I just walked through and all of the different experiences that you would have there, that is part of it. But then there's also the CMDB. So that's the biggest piece, right? We provide a built-in management pack for Service Manager that has a configuration management database.
Which is included by the portal, I guess.
It's
the portal and the
included
CMDB part of the management pack goes one-to-one, goes together, right?
To a
Without
certain-
the management pack, you cannot have the portal, I believe, right?
You would have both as part of this, if that's the question. Yeah, you would have both the portal and the management pack on the back end. Again, these are all open and extensible. We also are providing all of the workflows that we would have. So we've taken a series of, like I showed you that one mock-up of a workflow. We've taken all of these workflows that we would build, or common things that you would do within infrastructure as a service. And then we've taken those and we've created integrated orchestrator workflows. Again, those orchestrator workflows are doing a series of actions against all of these different components, but they're also consuming information from that CMDB that we've provided.
So basically, from customer perspective, if I show the advanced versus enterprise, what I sell is the value add through the actual MCS, basically the service, including into the portal / the management pack, right?
Correct. You're showing all of those things working in concert.
So it's the whole solution right there, all banked, deployed through the hydration, I believe.
Yes, we're doing turnkey deployments of each one of the products as we move up. So we look at advanced, right? We're deploying all of the System Center stack in a current turnkey fashion. And we're also doing that in a way that's in alignment with the best practices. Again, the mountains of documentation you would have to go through, we provide that kind of as what we call hydrated solution. So that's one that's fully automated. And then what we do on top of that is we layer that IP. And that's really a lot of the IP that we've done in the form of a reference implementation as part of the service, the solution offering.
A few slides down, I saw something about VMware vCenter 5, right?
Yep.
So with that saying, meaning like you can actually control with your portal the provisioning VMs through different hypervisors. I know, the Zen server from Citrix is already embedded inside because it's the same hypervisor. But vCenter is something always been like the actual question mark, for us.
So that's a good question. So from the data center services perspective, when we first did the reference implementation, we had to focus, there's a lot of automation that had to happen. And to be able to form that automation, we needed to look at the various layers, the hypervisor and so on, and we needed to make some decisions and some choices. What can we support? So in the earlier versions, we focused primarily on Hyper-V. And obviously, the System Center stack provided this multi-hypervisor management model, and that story gets better and better, including the release that we're having here with System Center 2012. But when we looked at DCS, one of the major pieces of investment we did in this latest version is being able to provide some of that capability that we do now against Hyper-V into a VMware infrastructure. So we wanted to be able to fall in line with the support of the product to be able to support additional hypervisors with this solution.
So everything you showed us through the portal, for Hyper-V, it can actually work for basically, VMware pretty much, right? We have the same kind of information, the provision, the provisioning, how much quota we use, the consume and stuff like that, the showback, or there is some sort of difference between the two of them.
Yeah, we provide a provisioning model for VMware that's in line with the product support.
All right, thank you.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so basically, whatever we support right now with the VMM 2012, it's 4.1, let's say. With Service Pack 1, maybe whatever, when it's ready, the RTM, vCenter 5, I believe, right? But then won't be ported inside the portal, basically. All right.
That's a good point. Yeah, so we're totally leveraging the platform support within System Center 2012
Correct.
to be able to do
all right
that.
then.
Yeah.
No, I know there is an orchestration package for the vCenter 5 or the Power CLI. You can use it and stuff like that. But my interest was if it was actually built in the portal, because the main power of all those things is actually the portal you guys built.
So that's a good point. So the vCenter 5 piece that's here, yeah, that is a great catch. So we're supporting in the portal, all that portal functionality is extending what Virtual Machine Manager does today. So we're limited to the support of Virtual Machine Manager from a product perspective, which is 4.1.
All right then. Oh, the last question.
Please.
The hydration. So you guys are using and using hydration. So the plan is to keep using hydration. Won't be any point in future that the hydration will be substituted by the so-called unified installer or whatever?
So will we use unified installer? So for right now, we're leveraging hydration.
Okay.
And again, we talk about that. We use it for a number of things. We use it for not only deployment of the System Center products, but also for our enhanced service templates. And we have a whole library of automation that we've provided around those task sequences because they're developed throughout the company for various customers, and we harvest that information so that we can provide that as kind of a solution offering to our customers. So we're continuing to leverage hydration in terms of using Unified Installer. Unified Installer provides a certain deployment stamp that currently doesn't align with some of the choices
kind of
that
things,
we've made.
Once user orchestrator, the hydration user, the task sequence, pretty much MTT reversed.
Correct.
All right,
yeah. So we're going to continue to use hydration for the time being.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Please come to the mics because they're recording this. Thank you.
Your examples on that you provided that there seem to be just Microsoft driven. I have a data center that has Linux servers as well. How does your data center services support that type of environment?
And I apologize really quick. You said what other services you said you provide?
You said I have Linux servers besides Microsoft. Your examples are all Microsoft Windows Server 2008.
Oh, thank you very much. So the question is, do we support the provisioning of Linux systems as well as Microsoft systems, Windows systems, because all the examples I described here were Windows. So the answer is yes. We do provide Linux provisioning through this infrastructure. So our solution provides the ability to provision those Linux workloads as well as Windows workloads. And we're able to do that in the same way. There's some limitations to how those are exposed, but we're able to do that in a managed fashion using the power of the System Center infrastructure on the back end from a management support perspective. So yes, we do provision it. Good questions. Any other good questions out there? Oh, awesome.
Just your enterprise customers, what are their expectations from requests to handoff as far as time?
So the question is, for a lot of the enterprise customers we work for, what is from a request to getting an actual system, what is their in terms of timing, what is their expectations? Timing varies. I think it varies based on organization. I think Travis and I were talking earlier, there's an idea of it taking 9 days or 9 hours to provision a system or longer. They want to reduce that, so we want to be able to do that in something along the lines of 90 minutes versus 9 days or 9 hours. So I think it varies based on customer, but I would say that the consumer expects these to be immediate. Right. They want to be able to consume these services as fast as possible, and they're doing it in a way because they're working against their resource model, right? What their quota is. So they want to be able to get those systems quickly so that they can start working. So it is in the neighborhood of hours that they want to be able to see these systems come up, or even less. It's just like email has changed our lives. I think self-service access to infrastructure as a service has changed a lot of the expectations on the part of the consumers. So it is very quick. They expect to be able to make all those options I described in the portal, make those choices, and have something relatively quickly within the hour or longer. So it depends on the customer. A lot of it is driven by the fact that it's taking a lot longer today for them to do those things, or there's too many manual processes that are in place. What we always want to make sure we're doing is not circumventing change control. So some organizations have a change control process that requires that they meet once a week or they meet twice a week to review and approve these. While we can provide automated self-provisioning, which is what we do by default, you can interject various places where you want manual process or manual intervention so that there can be an approval process. And that could be either one that notifies someone that has control, and we can use all of the power of basically a service manager to be able to allow for a quorum to be met and those types of things, or we can allow that to be automated so it's relatively fast. So it's really going to be based on the organization itself, and we've seen it all over the spectrum.
Yeah, as we've gone past below 5 days as a customer requirement, basically the main hurdle or challenge is change control.
Yeah, some of the fact that when you when you present this type of flexibility and speed, it takes a while. Again, it's kind of like the previous question you had. It takes a while for organizations to digest that change, right? Because a lot of the processes they have, the speed that they do things now allows them to interject other processes in between. So we wanted to make sure that not only did we allow you to pull the trigger in an automated way, but we wanted to make sure that we still provided that change control as core to what this is. So it always goes through the CMDB in our solution.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. If you have any additional questions, please come up or look for us all. Anybody in the black shirts, they should be able to answer us, and we'll be in the expo hall later.